going to be kicking off the day with Todd Boone, who is the head of North America for Dexory. So, Todd, welcome into the booth. How are you?
Great. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you on. Always happy to connect with you and talk a little bit. So, why don't you kind of give us a brief overview of Dexory for those that maybe are not familiar?
Sure. So Dexory, what you'll probably notice about us first is our big, tall robot. We often say we've got the tallest robot in the
It is
industry.
quite tall. Yes.
It is quite large. But what that robot allows us to do is have this sensor platform that effectively can build a picture of your entire warehouse every single day. And that helps us power a robust set of analytics where you can get the right insights based on the actuals of how your warehouse sits versus estimates of how it should be. And so I'd say that's sort of our whole premise is around building a real-time digital twin of your warehouse and then using that to drive your operations more efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's it's incredible to look at. I mean, I saw that manifest, right? I mean, we got some video on that if people want to check it out. But it's really interesting to see how it's capturing so much data, like you said, creating those images of your warehouse almost every day, right? You said, and being able to capture that and see all that data in those snapshots versus only going location to location or pallet to pallet, shelf to shelf. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about how kind of just fast it is in capturing that data.
Yeah. So, when you look at, if somebody was to go through a warehouse and cycle count it, they're probably looking at 60, maybe 100 locations that they could count in an hour.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the competing technologies out there that may fly around, you're probably 250 to 300 per hour type of thing, which is much better than a human has been able to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think when we looked at this problem, we took a completely different approach, and we said, well, if we equip an AMR with more sensors and more capability, we can extend that capacity exponentially. And so we actually claim about 10,000 locations per hour, so an order of magnitude higher than what's been available out there.
That's wild.
But we've actually gone up to 15,000, and it kind of depends on rack density, and there are a number of factors that play into it. But I think the other aspect, just to sort of put one more point out there, is we're capturing things like the barcode and a picture of the items that are on the shelf, and we're getting a volumetric scan of how much is there. But we'll also be equipping additional sensors into the unit as well, because now we've got this AMR platform that really becomes a sensor platform for us to add more and more capability as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that number, I mean, per hour is just, it's insane,
right?
Like to think about, right? I mean, I don't think there's, I have to say, maybe I'll go out on a limb here and say that I don't think there's any other solution here that's doing that much in that amount of time. Right?
There's nothing close. And I think, it's funny you say that, because it's a paradigm shift, because I had multiple customers yesterday that were coming up and they're saying, okay, how do I pick which section of my warehouse to do on a daily basis?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you do the whole warehouse. And they're like, well, no. Like, they're like, surely I have to pick apart.
The mind cannot comprehend, right?
Right. And so, often then you see the light bulb go off when you're saying, hey, I mean, how big is your warehouse? And you talk through the number of locations, and you're like, there's actually a couple options. And some of them were quite stunned when we said, not only could we do your warehouse every day, if it was high velocity, we could actually do it twice a day if that was of interest to you, because it was of a size we could actually do that.
Yeah. And I think it's just, it's so incredible, because it is that mindset that we've had, that like, oh, we're doing cycle counting, we're doing inventory counting, and, it's a slow process, right? Because it's, very manual. You got to look at all these things and make sure you're doing the right thing. But then, when you see it and you see those numbers, I mean, I can see that people would be in disbelief, right? So I'm curious in that regard. I mean, at what point does it, because I imagine maybe for like smaller warehouse, maybe it doesn't make as much sense. I mean, where do you say like, okay, this is a solution that makes sense and we should be looking at this?
It's funny, right? And obviously you cover warehouses. The answer with warehouses is always a bit of it depends.
Always, yeah.
And we
that's going to be the next T-shirt. Like I say, it depends.
It depends. They're sexy and it depends. But it's one of those things. We have 3 V's that we talk about. One of them is volume, right? So how large is the facility, right? And to your point, like even if it's too small, and in a lot of cases it's too small. But then another one that plays into it, what's the velocity of the turnover in that location, right? And so that starts playing, because the higher the velocity, even if you're running at a really high accuracy, rate, you're still going to have errors just as a nature of that accuracy rate. But the third thing is value. And sometimes the value of the items itself can have a disproportionate impact on, whether or not that's a good fit from a size perspective. So to give you an idea, so not just to dance around, we normally say about, 250,000 square feet, it starts to make sense. 25-ish thousand locations, right? It starts to make sense. But we do have some warehouses that are even smaller than that, because in one case, they're actually using the volumetric capabilities to use it as revenue generation, because their customers have traditionally underreported. It's basically air transport. They've underreported what they're actually sending to the supplier, and now that they're doing the volumetric assessment, they're like, well, actually, it's not this size, it's bigger, and they have a revenue opportunity there. They also have chain of custody. So even though it's a smaller facility, it can kind of, but the sweet spot is typically 250,000-ish plus.
Okay.
And the largest we're in, just to kind of answer probably the next question, is about 1 million square feet.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that makes sense definitely too. And that velocity, I think, is such a key, because I spent some time in inventory control in my career, and I mean, it's very true. I mean, when you look at trying to track those items, and usually the priority becomes like those A movers, right? What has the highest velocity? What's moving the most, because it's getting touched the most, basically. So it's most prone to errors. But with this, I mean, you don't necessarily have to worry, I guess, about from an ABC perspective how you're going to count, because you're just going to get it all done in a day. Right?
And it gets it all done. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have that complete holistic picture sort of every day to base decisions off versus averages or hopes, right? Like expectations of, well, we think that's what's there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting, and it's such an interesting form factor too to see it, but it works to be able to capture that much data in that time, because you see, I think it goes up almost 40 feet, right?
It was 40 feet.
Yeah. You're capturing, from the bottom location of the rack all the way to the top at the same time, versus, like I said before, going location to location. So it's been very interesting to see, and you're the head of North America, right? So we have some North America news recently, right? That you guys deployed for first deployment, I think, in North America, right?
Yeah, DB Schenker.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so DB Schenker, they were the first customer that we were working with in North America. And it's interesting because we started, I guess, discussions, and Dexory, of course, just to kind of paint the picture, initially began in the UK, started extending into Europe, and then some of our customers in that region said, hey, we'd like you to come to the US. And, DB Schenker was sort of the first one that we that we landed on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And it's been a great deployment for us. It's interesting. So for me personally, as newer to the company, that was the first one I was directly involved with.
Yeah.
And, it's also one of those things where when you actually see some of the customer reaction is pretty powerful too, where some of those light bulb moments when they start understanding some of the capabilities that they had that they didn't previously have. And things like, well, wait a second, we just found this. We didn't have to look for it.
I was just going to ask you. I'm sure they found some stuff. Yeah.
Right. They found some stuff that maybe, like wasn't where it was expected. They found some stuff faster than they were able to traditionally, right? And those types of things. And so, I think when they start looking at that whole picture, that real-time visibility really starts helping them. And most of our customers just run that business much more efficiently, because you're looking for something, you just type in the SKU and here it is, right? So they know exactly where it is.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. And I think for somebody in the outside of the warehouse industry, the idea that like, oh, you lose product in the warehouse, like, is like, how could that be, right? But unfortunately, it's very easy, right? I mean, that's the problem with it. But, I think that having that revelation and being able to see that and capturing that data on a daily basis all the way through, I mean, because in other words, I mean, you wouldn't, if you had a pallet that was in the wrong location, it could be a month before you find it again, right? Or it's just by accident you come across it again because something else is supposed to be there, and now you got two things in the wrong place, right? So I mean, it's such a win to be able to do that. And I'm curious, like, so what did they do? Because there's a lot of discussion around automation and robotics, and how does that impact jobs and things like that. So how did that change what maybe like their inventory department looked like? How did they kind of work around that?
Yeah, I think, with most of our customers, frankly, there aren't huge changes to the department. I mean, it's one of those things where cycle counting as like even a task and having people go and count. Inventory is often difficult to find and retain labor for that, and it allows them to reallocate them just to other tasks in the warehouse. So there are, some customers that say, hey, we could look at reducing the number of FTEs counting things, but the vast majority are saying, rather than counting, we can actually get them doing all these other things, because I think the labor shortage isn't quite as profound as it was 2-3 years ago, but it is still there. And so a lot of them are still kind of struggling with having enough people doing the right things. And so this helps with I think that aspect at a sort of at that higher level. I think if we take it down one level though, and you look at the software interface that we provide, basically also allows them to get those resources prioritized, right? So it's kind of when you think of just red, yellow, green, right? Like from a task list perspective, green you don't have to worry about. Yellow is sort of okay, it's on our radar to look at, but reds, like that inventory team can say, hey, here are the things I need to zero in that are going to have the biggest bang for the buck versus just sort of going through things sequentially. It's actually prioritized with some intelligence.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense, and being able to kind of call that out, because you could, like you said, the green is like I don't really need to look at you, right? But it could be like, oh, I just counted 100 locations today, and all were green, right? So like, did I really need to go do that, right? But so I think the call out there and being able just to elevate those exceptions, those issues to the user, I think is really the win there, and allows you to focus more on what's my problem versus why am I just looking at stuff that's already good, right?
Yeah. So rather than have a repetitive task just to do it, you start to have those insights. And and to that point too, what we tend to see is a bit of a curve right at the beginning, and then over time where it sort of flattens out, and the overall accuracy and operational efficiency just it gets higher, it goes up, and then sort of maintains. But that's the beauty of it, is it allows you to maintain, but without putting more resource in it.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. It's a very interesting solution, and certainly great to see it coming into North America with some success here. I'd be interested to see how it continues to evolve and develop and fix all the inventory issues in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so Todd, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing some information about Dexory with us. If people are interested in learning more about it, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely ping us on LinkedIn. You can go to our website, which is basically www.dexory.com. And if you are at Modex here, come on over. We're in B708 is our booth. And, we'd love to talk to anybody who has inventory problems, which is a lot of people.
Everybody, I would say.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't want to admit it, but
exactly.
I think it's real. Yeah. All right. So, Todd, thank you so much for that. And thank you for coming by the booth today.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Good to talk to you.
All right. You too.
All right.